Hear that? That's the sound of someone trying to steal your crypto. Every day, thousands of hackers online are doing the same. That's why Arculus uses air-gapped cold storage technology to protect your assets. Using our keycard and wallet app to form a protective barrier, Arculus insulates you from hackers and puts control of your digital assets back in your hands. Order the first truly air-gapped crypto wallet at getarculus.com.
Welcome to Fantasy Hockey Life, presented by Fantrax.
Here's Jack Hughes, and Hughes scored! Oh, the kid did it!
Your source of information and analysis to help you win your fantasy hockey league.
Barkov has a step, in on Stalock, Barkov shoots and scores!
Here's your hosts, Jesse Severe and Victor Nunez.
Fantasy Hockey Live. That's right. It is once again Jesse Severe from Fantrax, joined by the one, the only, the hockey writers, the Victor Nunez. Victor, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jesse. It's been so fun to watch this wild week of opening games. It's been a lot of really interesting storylines and always fun to kind of tease out what's new and what's interesting. And one of the things that I think really kind of surprised me is I'm going to pose you a question to throw you for a loop here because you like to do that to me. So,
the tables are turned. All right.
I got 3 numbers here, and I want you to see if you know what's the relevance to this new hockey season. And those numbers are 3, 7, and 12. What do those numbers mean to you, if anything? And if you want a hint, I'll give you one. You need a hint?
I could use a hint. Yes.
Think of the 2021 draft.
Let's see. Is that I mentioned it later. I think this is Sillinger and McTavish and Eklund.
Yeah, those are the 3 drafted players that are playing in the NHL, which is, we knew this draft was going to be weird. And of course, you expect kind of the first overall, maybe second overall, but no, it's the 3rd, the 7th, and the 12th overall picks that are playing in the NHL.
Oh, now I get it. 3, 7, and 12. Yeah. That I agree. That was not my guess of the first 3 guys who are going to debut.
No, and they're making an impact. It's been really fun to watch them and all the just unique storylines that are popping up, and we're gonna talk about some of those.
That's right. The rain has come to the prairie. Flowers are in bloom once again because fantasy hockey is back. We have real results. We are winning and losing matchups. By the time you hear this, we probably will have won and or lost matchups, and it is most exciting. And we're gonna get to talk about a few of the things. I mean, we are going to be doing some different things during the season than what we did in the off season. Off season was really about previewing and getting you through draft season. During the season, we are, we try not. We're not going to give you the line changes on every team every week. That is not the type of show you're in for. We try to find ways to apply what we're talking about to Dynasty. So things that, you can't get away from looking at the recent performances of hockey. That's what you want to hear. But we are going to try to do things that we think will benefit you in your Dynasty leagues. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to hear what kind of questions that you have. And that is what we have done today for half of our show. And then we're going to comment on a couple of players who we see good or bad things on early in the season in the second half of our show, and a couple of segments that we will introduce at that time. One of the ways that you could get your questions in future shows, if you happen to have questions, is to join our free Discord. It is a nice little social networking application where 150-ish of your best fantasy hockey talking pals for this show get together and chat hockey day and night. We have a lot of fun trade talk going in there. We have people talking about their dynasty teams. We had some people looking for league filling before the season. I think probably I'm guessing as the season goes along, we could have people who have abandoned keeper teams that are in their leagues and they might be looking for people. I wouldn't be surprised at all. And so if you're looking into dynasty and you hadn't had that opportunity to do a draft in the preseason and you want to get your feet wet that way, it might be a place to hang out. And also, we have our friends at Fantrax. The show is sponsored by Fantrax. They actually hang out with us in the Discord, and people have given suggestions to Fantrax in there. And Fantrax has actually changed things in their platform based on that. You may notice that recently they rolled out the ability to set your lineup, auto set it not only for a day, but to set it a week ahead, to set it as many days as you want ahead by pushing a button, which is really cool. And a lot of people have been clamoring for it for a long time. But they took that feedback, and I frankly, I think it was from our users. So if you want to get in on some of that, and also if you want to ask us questions, you can email us fantasyhockeylife@gmail.com if you don't prefer to use the social networking platforms. And you can also get the invite to our Discord by emailing us or hitting us up on Twitter. Well, Victor, I delay too long because we have some good listener questions to get to. Let's take a brief break, and we're going to come back and answer a couple of them. Back to talk listener questions. That's right. The Lifers came through for us. They had questions, and we are going to try to supply some answers from the wise mind, particularly of Victor Nuno. Some of the dynasty type guys that we're interested in. We had a question from Danik in the Discord, kind of wondering about some Nick Robertson comps or some comparable players and what we can expect for, as you like to call him, the lesser Robertson coming up in the near future. What do you think? What kind of guys would you compare Nick Robertson to, Victor?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, Nick Robertson, I joke about him being the lesser Robertson, still very, very talented and has yet to really make a full impact. So we don't really know how good he is or can be, but he certainly has looked really good in junior. He's looked pretty darn good in the AHL, only had those 21 games in the AHL. So he was kind of split there last season. Spent some time. I think he was injured or had taxi squad, so didn't get the full experience there. But, the question here really is like, how good is he going to be when he makes it? Is he going to be really, really worth it? And that's what we're going to try and dig into here. And, I think part of the issue is in Toronto, he's a little bit blocked with all the contracts and all the people they have, but it's also important to remember like what his timeline is. And I know it seems like we've been teasing him or seeing him for ready to break in for years now. And he came in the playoff and in the bubble. And then, he just had a handful of games last season. We're hoping each time that he would kind of like, spend more time, but it didn't really happen. But the reality is that those were both entry-level slides for Nick Robertson, and he still has 3 full seasons on his entry-level contract, including this one right now, 21-22. So he is still, they're still going to be very patient with him, and they're not going to rush him, and they want to get the maximum value of his ELC while he's contributing. So I imagine that he gets some call up this season, and maybe he earns a spot, but it's probably going to be next season. And so the last 2 seasons of his ELC where he really contributes. So that's important to kind of keep in mind that those contracts definitely dictate a lot. And they're going to want to know what they have with him, but they're probably not going to push that this season. And Danik was also mentioning that my colleague over at the Hockey Writers, Pete Baracchini, had an article in October 2020 comparing Nick Robertson to Braden Point and Jake Gensel. And so we will look at that real quick. But I also want to mention that one of the things we're going to be doing is bringing on some of these scouts and prospect writers and kind of interview them. And so we're going to have Pete on in a few weeks here. And so we can ask him questions like this. But Point and Gensel are pretty interesting. Their Gensel was a pretty fascinating case because in models like hockey prospecting, he did not look great. He was not one of the guys that you would expect that would be a super high producer. He was kind of one of these late bloomers, if you will, who really took off in college, drafted out of the USHL. So it never looked super strong. Whereas Braden Point, on the other hand, he was just a little bit smaller, and that's why he didn't go as high. But he had the pedigree and the high points upside in WHL from an early age. So Robertson, was in the OHL. So, a little bit different than those two guys. And he didn't have super, super high numbers. in his draft -1 or draft season. He kind of really popped off in his draft +1 season, and then he's kind of regressed a little bit since then, just mainly because of opportunity. I'm not sure you can necessarily hold that against him because he just didn't play a whole lot of games last season, which was his D+2 season. So his comparables on the hockey prospecting model are guys like Gary Roberts, Paul Stastny, Rob Niedermeyer, Yuri Laterra, and the guy I think he looks the most like of the comparables offered there is Sebastian Aho. And Aho, of course, is kind of a star now, but he didn't quite look that way. In fact, in most of the comparable seasons, Robertson looked better than him, or at least equivalent. And Aho was a bit of a late bloomer, really coming into his own once he entered the NHL, which is draft +2 season. But he has kind of a seesaw up and down star probability of his case, and I'm not sure that the play is necessarily similar. And Robertson is smaller than all these guys. So all these guys are a little bit on the smaller side, but Robertson is 2 inches shorter than all the rest. Gensel, Point, and Aho, who are all 5'11". So you got that issue going for you too. So, in the time that he has had in the NHL, Robertson hasn't looked great, which wasn't a huge sample size. I mean, it's only been 6 NHL games, but he kind of didn't look great offensively or defensively too much. So the underwhelming sample size, but the high sort of upside, and the fact that they're going to need him on that cheap contract, eventually that he's going to get put into a very nice position next to some of those superstars. So I still really think Nick Robertson is going to be a guy you're going to want to hold on to. And I think, if anything, these underwhelming results are kind of prolonged. Arrival time might be an opportunity to buy on him. And so if you're thinking of trading Nick Robertson, definitely hit us up with who you might be getting back, because I would want it to be a very strong piece back, not a big question mark guy. So let us know who you might be considering for that. But in general, I would actually try to buy for him, and maybe someone's kind of getting annoyed with waiting and wants to kind of have someone that's playing more games now. So that's kind of what I think about Nick Robertson. Jesse, what do you think?
Well, first of all, whenever I hear anybody compared to Aho, Aho is actually the sound that I make. It's incredibly descriptive. I go, Aho. So I'm excited to hear that he might have a comparable with somebody at that level of talent. It gets down to, you talk about the opportunity in Toronto. Opportunity is fleeting and talent is forever in a lot of ways. And there is that paradox when you think of the big market club that constantly has all the stars, and you think this guy's never going to get an opportunity. The drawback to that, like you say, is he has a number of years left on a rookie contract, and they have 3 $10 million players in Toronto that are going to take up a good chunk of that cap for years. They're going to have lower price guys filling around that. And even though Toronto is usually able to attract a couple of cagey veteran former stars like Wayne Simmons and Jason Spezza to have, signed for very low dollar contracts because of the market, because of wanting to play for that team or whatever other reasons, Joe Thornton last year, there is sometimes a lack of opportunity because you can get blocked by some of those types of veterans. But I think if Robertson is able to contribute, the sky's the limit. He'll get his opportunities in Toronto if he is able to do some things. And we do know there's a number of talented forwards that he could play with in those situations. So I think the opportunity will be there. So yeah, I think, everybody who listens to the show knows that I've converted and I'm a total Maple Leafs ringer. So this is yet another time, maybe Nick will become the superior Robertson someday. Who knows? Second question, also from our first question asker, Danik. It pertains to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he's asking us to compare 2 new defensemen who have been traded to the team this year. A couple of guys who are sort of emerging from that rookie status, or maybe at one point are going to be type of guys like 100 gamers that we're looking at as they hit their stride. Neither one of them is quite at that point yet. But we've got Jake Bean and we've got Adam Boqvist. So how would you put Jake Bean and Adam Boqvist together? Compare, contrast, Victor.
Yeah, this is a really fun one. They both have some pretty interesting things about them. Bean, I've been really high on Jake Bean for a really long time and kind of didn't understand his lack of use. It's possible that last season we saw a reason why maybe Carolina wasn't as high on him and didn't keep him, because he played 42 games. He didn't really make a huge impact, which is kind of bad. You kind of want to be able to be noticed and be noticeable, right? So there's that. And actually, if you look at 42 games, is not the hugest sample size, but it's not like 7 or 10 or anything. And if you look at the like evolving hockey charts of like expected goals and goals against and Corsi and all that, he was actually fairly bad in several of those metrics. Jake Bean was. The only things that were decent were expected goals for and Corsi against, but his actual goals for and expected goals against and Corsi for were all extremely negative or fairly negative anyways. And so that's a little bit disturbing. And maybe there's some other private metrics that Carolina had and why they chose not to protect him in the expansion draft and then trade him after he was not selected. So there's maybe something I'm starting to question, and maybe there's something more there that we're not privy to, and maybe that's kind of reflected in his why teams have kind of soured on him. And with Jake Bean, it's he, I think, has flown under the radar a little bit because he is a very good player, and being on that Chicago team that had all those superstars, and he wasn't necessarily getting the best opportunity perhaps, but he was getting some, and his points, his numbers were still pretty good. And so that makes you, maybe you kind of had a different opinion of him, not thinking he wasn't, maybe playing as much or getting the opportunity, but he was actually really good in Chicago. So I think Boqvist is definitely a guy who has some more offense to give. And if you just look at their development and like their star potential in their draft +3 season in the hockey prospecting model, Boqvist is definitely higher, and as well as his NHL probability. So, that looks good for Boqvist as well. It was a little disappointing to me in the first couple games. He's had less time on ice than I would expect, and less than Bean actually. So
4 minutes less per game so far. In the first 2 games.
That's very surprising to me that he would have so little. But Werenski, I was expecting. Gavrikov has shown to be pretty serviceable as well. But being much higher is kind of surprising, and also getting the not getting the power play time, although Boqvist got a little and Werenski just a little too. They didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. So, I think the bottom line is that Boqvist has shown it longer at the NHL level, and I think that he's going to get that second fiddle opportunity on the power play before Bean will, and they're both going to be behind Werenski. So I'm not sure either is really going to have an opportunity to shine a whole bunch. But I'm starting to sour a little bit on Jake Bean, even though I still want to see him in this opportunity that he's getting right now to play big minutes and see what he can do. I want to see what the data shows on that, because from what I've seen and from what I remember, he probably has more to give than what he's shown so far. So bottom line is I don't know, unless you're in a super deep league, I don't know about holding Jake Bean though, because he's got to pass 2 really good players that are going to have offensive opportunity over him. So if it's really deep, then sure. But otherwise, it's going to be Boqvist, I'm pretty sure, having more opportunity and more relevance for a couple of years. And if you're holding someone for 3+ years, like you might have to hold Bean for him to get there, I'm not sure that that's going to be worth it. Jesse, do you see it a little differently than that?
I mean, I think you nailed it. Boqvist has already gotten some power play time this year, which was very pleasing. Bean is playing with Zach Werenski, and that's kind of interesting with the additional minutes that he gets, maybe kind of taking more of a Seth Jones defensive type approach. I'm not quite sure if that's what we're seeing there or not. And of course, Bean has it on Boqvist that he has already scored 1 more goal. He's on pace for 41 for the year after 2 games. So we should be in a good position. Obviously better than Boqvist, who has no points so far. And each citizen of Columbus, Ohio was actually allotted 1 goal against Arizona the other day. I was watching that game, and it was just such a horrific blowout. Who knew that Columbus really had that in them? Although Elvis Merzlikins for the win, baby. I would say I've been holding Jake Bean forever in our common dynasty league, and it's been painful because he typically has not been productive enough to start over anybody else in that points format. I'm pleased to see that he's getting the minutes, and hopefully at least he'll accumulate some of the counting stats, some of the physical stats, the bash. But for right now, I'm just happy to get some positive reinforcement on Bean because I've never really been able to get that over the years. It's tougher to keep the faith. Now, the one thing I will say about Boqvist is I thought for a long time that Boqvist and Doc were the two untouchable guys in Chicago's prospect system. And I was I was kind of taken aback that they were willing to trade him for essentially Seth Jones signing rights. They didn't get full Seth Jones. They got the ability to sign Seth Jones for a heck of a lot of money. And only a certain amount of control left of him. So, and obviously maybe it's easier to extend and sign him and get all that done if you sign him while he's still under contract, but he was a rental, at the time that they got him, and they moved Boqvist for him. And it kind of makes me think, did Chicago know something about what this guy's future, this guy's true level of talent was, or this just truly, no, we thought he was really good, but we needed to send that much value to get Seth Jones back, and that's just what you have to do. And sometimes when a team is willing to trade away a guy who previously I would have thought was untouchable, I just pay attention. You never know. Maybe it's nothing. Let's go on to a third teammate comparison here, and this time we've got a couple of young Florida wingers, Grigory Denisenko and Owen Tippett. Compare, contrast, Victor.
Yeah, this is a fun one. I believe we've even talked about this one before, but it's worth updating because, new things have happened or not happened in a while since then. So I think the biggest thing to talk about between Denisenko and Tippett is their style. Like, they're very different players, right? Like, Tippett is a goal scorer. He's always been a goal scorer. He's got a great shot. He's not a bad two-way player, but that's not why you have him on the ice. It's clearly for the goal scoring talent. And he kind of needs someone to do the heavy lifting for him. He needs someone to open up space. He can find some space, but he needs someone to get him the puck so he can hammer it on net. That's kind of what he needs. And Denisenko is kind of that player who can do that. So, in a perfect world, 3-4 years from now, these guys are making sweet music together and putting up lots of points. Who knows if that'll happen? But Denisenko is definitely more of a playmaker. He's very creative, good at holding onto the puck and creating space for people, and ultimately will probably be an assist-heavy kind of a scorer if he does make it to the NHL. Whereas you have Tippett being more of a goal scorer. So that's kind of important to keep in mind. In terms of the hockey prospecting model, they're both kind of like trending down a little bit and don't have the hugest upside. Although I still believe in both these guys as strong talents, and and certainly Tippett has started to show it. He's looked really good in his time last season as well as this season already, getting a little bit more opportunity. So it's fun to kind of see that. And they haven't really gotten, the huge opportunity in terms of time on ice. That's one of the biggest things is that Florida has a very stacked team now, especially with Korang, Bennett, and Reinhart. And Lindell is coming in, and Lindell is just an excellent, two-way player. So he's going to be in the lineup, I imagine. And so Tippett's going to, he has a little bit lower ice time, and Denisenko would have a really hard time cracking the lineup right now because of all those reasons. So, we'll see. I personally would lean Tippett because goal scoring is harder to find in general. And if you're in a points league that rewards goals more, that's kind of a no-brainer. But also just in categories leagues, one of the hardest things to find, power play points, power play goals, those things are really difficult to come across. So if you can get that, then you'll probably be better off. And Denisenko is still kind of trying to find his way. He's sort of had not full seasons for a couple of years now, kind of little split time between the NHL, AHL last season, taxi squad. And so hopefully this season with the taxi squad, he'll be able to just light it up in the AHL and come up at some point, whether this season or next, and really really kind of hold down a spot, but he's still kind of finding his way. Tippett's kind of arrived, and it's just a matter of deployment now for Tippett. Can he get the deployment that he needs to really be relevant? Because he, like I said, he really needs someone to get it to him. He's been playing with Huberdeau and Tippett primarily. Huberdeau and Bennett Owen Tippett's been playing with. Has also had a little bit of time with some of the other guys. But if he can be with Huberdeau, that's great. And or if he can get up with Barkov, that would be even better. But I like me some Owen Tippett, and I think the goal upside can be pretty big. Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, they're kind of at different places in their career, right? I mean, we're looking at Tippett actually premiered back in the 2017-18 season. That's a lot of seasons ago. He came up for just a couple of games at the end of the year out of the OHL. And then the next season played entirely in the OHL, and the next season mostly in the OHL before he finally got back to the AHL and the NHL in the last 2 years. But he's got more games under his belt already. We know a little bit more about what he is, but every time he's come up all 3 years, when he's played minutes, his average time on ice has been somewhere in the 11s. Like you say, he's not getting the minutes. He's a little bit buried on that depth chart. The one thing I like about Denisenko last year, and who knows, this is still small sample because he only had 7 games last year and he hasn't played yet this year in the pros, is he had 15 hits in that time. So if he's going to be able to knock some people around, but also get some time on ice and be able to do some of the things that, we're talking about with the higher points upside, that could be really nice. That could be a decent combination for you to get assists and peripherals out of a guy like him. And I worry that we're already seeing that Florida is going to treat Tippett maybe as more of a journeyman. I don't know. We'll see. But that's kind of my thought on those two guys, both of whom definitely should be on your radar. Let's move to Los Angeles, California, where we'll talk about a couple of frequent topics of conversation. Well, one particularly frequent topic of conversation of this show, but two different forwards from the show. And that is Alex Turcotte and Gabe Vilardi. What do you make of Mr. Turcotte versus Mr. Vilardi, Victor?
Yeah, so Vilardi, 11th overall pick back in 2017, and Turcotte was part of that phenomenal 18-19 USNTDP team that had Zegras and Hughes and Caulfield. All those guys were amazing. And so Turcotte was a little bit of one of the forgotten guys on that team. And part of it is that he's really just your kind of hold down the fort center kind of two-way guy. Yes, he has offense, but Turcotte to me is just a really solid middle six center. It's kind of funny actually that now the Kings have a Philip Deneau type, because I kind of feel like in some ways there's a little bit of similarity there between Turcotte and someone like Phil Deneau, who certainly has some offense, can be fantasy relevant, but is really more of an excellent real life player than a fantasy player. And the fantasy relevance is a little bit fringy at times, certainly with the right deployment. And if you got nice wingers and nice power play time, that would be pretty good. But if he doesn't, he's kind of on that borderline, right? And I kind of see a little bit of that in Turcotte, especially with Byfield there, and who knows how much longer Anze Kopitar is going to play, because he's obviously still an excellent player and it's looking great right now starting the season. So, they have so many options down the middle, do the Kings, that it's going to be a little bit difficult to break in. I mean, the other guy that's there is Gabe Vilardi right now. He's in the NHL. He's playing third line center role, and you got Blake Lizotte as your fourth line center. So, what is it going to take to displace those guys? And they have a ton of really capable centers as well. I do think that these are probably the two best of that young crop, aside from Byfield. So you stick Byfield up there in that 1-2 role at some point in the next year or two. And then where does that leave everyone else? Deneau, your third line center, Turcotte, your fourth line center, Vilardi moves over to the wing. It's going to be difficult. Vilardi is definitely more of a point scorer and not as great as a two-way player. And even though I say that, Vilardi's points per 60 isn't anything amazing. If you look at the 65 game sample size that Vilardi has had, his points per 60 is 1.92. That's equivalent to guys like Alex Galchenyuk, Artem Anisimov, Brian Boyle. These are not world bangers, right? And sure, you can say, well, those are his first 65 games as opposed to those other guys' career, and that's totally fair. And there probably is still room to grow for Velarde, but what I'm saying is I'm just not sure that the upside is huge there. So bottom line, I think with these two guys, as much as I really think they have skill and they're kind of exciting, I don't think that either of them are going to be huge fantasy assets moving forward. You know, as I mentioned, Byfield being there, maybe one or two of them move up the middle, but I really don't see Turcotte doing that. I think he's more of like your middle to bottom six center that you could just throw out and really rely on. And I think he holds down that role. So what else are you getting from these guys? Is it really going to be worth it to hold on to them? I don't know. I think maybe if you can get something nice for them, it might be better to trade. Let us know what you come up with, what offers you have, and what you're thinking about. Jesse, do you have anything else to say on those two?
Yeah, I think Velarde, one of the reasons he used to come up a lot is because of his back injuries, which were chronic and really cost him a lot of developmental time at earlier stage. But he's had a couple of healthy years now. And one wonders what happens when you lose that type of development time, or whether it means that a guy could be on a later path to really start to break out and flourish in a different way. He's got 1 year left before restricted free agency, so LA is going to have to make a decision next year. And like you said, Anze Kopitar, the man who has bags under his eyes that look like Herman Munster, has 3 more years of $10 million per. So he's not going anywhere as long as he can perform with that team. And obviously, he's one of the last guys from that Kings dynasty who the whole team, the franchise, will maintain loyalty to probably until they just absolutely could not anymore. And then, of course, Quentin Byfield, Philip Deneau, it's not changing, not making it easier. So it would have to be a wing situation for Velarde. And frankly, that would be great for us fantasy players if he could get a scoring role and lose some of that responsibility and take a winger type situation. Every prospect, Victor, this is my new theory. Every single prospect goes through what I'm going to call the funnel. Okay. Imagine a funnel on its side, and it starts really, really big, and then it narrows down really, really small. And that's the range of outcomes on guys. You start out with a wide range of outcomes, and as you progress, you end up with a tiny little narrow bit where you come out of the funnel. And that's what you're going to end up being. And yeah, it's fits and starts, and people can change and they aren't always the same. But I think Velarde is well down into that funnel. It's not that his career is going down the drain, but it means that I think we do have a better sense of him and where he is going to end up landing now that he's had some time in the NHL. Turcotte is still a little bit further away as he's just getting into the AHL. So I think there's just a little bit wider variant possibility with him. But neither one of these guys looks to be a superstar at this point. I think I probably would favor Turcotte a little bit, although you can't discount the fact that Velarde has already made it to the pros and done it there. I wonder whether they'll be able to keep him around after this year, whether they will, that he'll be more of a journeyman type across different teams, or maybe he'll catch on in a center role in a different team with a little bit less depth in that area. Certainly plenty of teams are looking for competent centermen to come along and play with them. That is going to do it for our listener questions. We're going to take a brief break. We're going to come back with some new features.
Fall is a season of gathering that brings us together with warmth and color. So whether it's a birthday, anniversary, or a special event, celebrate your friends and family with a gorgeous bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. 1-800-Flowers makes it easy to find your reason and brighten someone's day with exclusive offers and great values on bouquets and arrangements. To order today, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/tune-in.
It's time to take a swing. That is going to be a new feature that Victor and I do, where we each bring up a couple of guys from the season so far who we think are maybe getting ready to pop a little bit, and try not to just react to the news of the week and say, oh, Tyler Bertuzzi had 4 goals, because dang it, first of all, Tyler Bertuzzi, but second of all, we're looking for guys maybe who've done something in a small sample, but have maybe impressed us or are starting to look like maybe in a more attractive dynasty asset than we previously might have thought. And I'll take this one first. But first, a couple of things. First of all, the first one is just kind of for fun. I looked at the individual expected goals per 60 for the season so far. This is through the Saturday games in the schedule. So some teams have played as few as one. And Andreas Johnson and Dylan Larkin are in the top 4 in the NHL in individual expected goals per 60. I don't know who would have had that in their betting line going into the season. Now, mind you, huge asterisk on this, but it's just a fun one. First of all, the Detroit debacle with Tampa, the huge scoring game where Detroit ended up losing in overtime, but put up a whole bunch of goals on Tampa fairly unexpectedly, had something to do with that. And Larkin got tossed and then suspended, which is why he's only got one game so far. He played 11 minutes and 39 seconds. So how much you should take out of a rate stat from that, I don't know. It's the ultimate kind of small sample. Also, Johnson has in common a goal and 3 shots. Both of them have a goal and 3 shots on the year. And both of them played exactly 11 minutes and 39 seconds. So apparently that's what happens when you play 11 minutes and 39 seconds with a goal and 3 shots, is you become a great individual expected goals per 60. It's math. If nothing else, it's just fun. But maybe one that's a little bit more for reals. But it also takes off Andreas there is Dawson Mercer. We talk about prospects you mentioned at the beginning of the show who were just drafted this year. Dawson Mercer kind of snuck a little bit under my radar in terms of debuting in the NHL this year and thinking that he was going to have a relevant role early on. And he really has. He got power play time on ice and an assist on 12 minutes in his first NHL game. He's the 3rd center on that team, although some of the coverage of the game said that he did get to play some wing time as well, which would be nice. He's really going to need probably ultimately to get in a wing role to pop a little bit for this team, because I think he's going to be buried below Hughes and Hischier if he is the 3rd centerman, and that's not what we want for our dynasty teams, except maybe in extremely deep formats. Preferably, I'd like to get him up there with Jack Hughes, obviously, who's off to a great start this season. But then Janssen and Mercer are playing with future Hall of Famer Tomas Tatar. So I think that's probably going to get us to a good position for him early in the season. And you should be a little bit, the Devils have played one game that I can go back and look at. And you have to put an asterisk by this because the only team they played so far were the Chicago Blackhawks, who are exactly awful. So I don't know, maybe don't take too much out of that, but it was an extremely promising debut. This is not one of those guys who shows up like Philip Tomasino and just kind of gets a few minutes and doesn't do a whole lot. And he's crazy talented, but what's going to happen and when is it going to happen? And can I afford to keep him on my roster until then? Dawson Mercer gives a little bit of hope to the fantasy player who thinks, am I going to be able to survive with this guy on my bench versus a streamer early in the season? It made it a lot more easy for you to be patient with him. So Victor, any reactions to any of these, and who are you looking at as your take a swing guys?
Yeah, I absolutely love Dawson Mercer. I think I even mentioned recently that at the time, I was kind of torn between him and Holtz. I liked Mercer so much more as an overall player, but I know Holtz has the goal scoring. But I think Mercer has passed him, like literally passed him on the depth chart. And part of it is because of that. He's such a good all-around player that he was able to make the team, and he offers more than just I'm going to stand in this spot and shoot, which is basically to boil it down what Holtz does. He does a little bit more than that, but that's kind of his limited impact is really that. So and Mercer, small sample size, but was pretty good, in his opening, and that's what he has to offer is really to drive play, and that's really good for everyone else on New Jersey. I think it will. Yeah, ideally you'd like him playing with some of those more talented players, but he'll get there. He's still young, so we'll see. And yeah, overall it's been That was a wild game. That Detroit Tampa game was just absolutely wild. And if anyone watched it, I hope we are in store for more of that kind of chaos, because that was just really fun. Lots of goals. And when you score 6 goals, you should probably win, I would say, most of the time. And Detroit did not.
Unless you're Detroit. Yeah, unless
Yeah.
you're Detroit.
In some ways, it was kind of the best of both worlds, right? It's like you get a lot of scoring, you do a lot of good things, but then you still end up losing and get closer to Shane Wright. So there's that. So I have a couple guys that I wanted to mention. First one is Jonathan Drouin, and that was really fun to see him score a goal. He, if you didn't follow the story, has been struggling with anxiety, and that's why he took some time away from the team and was really having a hard time, and was able to kind of get some help, and sounds like he's mostly past it and able to come back and contribute to the team. So 2 points in 3 games. We'll see where all of that falls out, but it's kind of nice. He's playing with Josh Anderson, who apparently he is close with and really helped him through some of these difficult times. And so it's nice to see them have chemistry on the ice as well. And Christian Dvorak between the two seems like a pretty good spot. And just on another note, I hope we can all help destigmatize and empathize with people who are struggling like that, and not make it more difficult for them. So if you have anyone like that in your life, hopefully you can offer some support, because people can come through and do nice things like score goals like Jonathan Drouin did. So I like his spot on the roster, and I don't know if he's going to be a season-long hold, but I think that he looks pretty decent right now where he is. So he's really available too. He's only 52% rostered on Fantrax and only 18% on Yahoo. So Jonathan Drouin is out there, and Montreal did not look great overall as a team. Unfortunately, they don't have the best schedule next week, just Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I know we're not really like a streaming show, but just thinking like, is it long term or is it short term? Obviously, you're going to have to wait and see, but I'd pick him up now and see how long that lasts, because I think Montreal is a better team than what they've shown so far. The next guy, just briefly, is Jared McCann. I think Jesse and I were in agreement that we were most excited about Jared McCann on the Kraken. 82 point pace for 82 games. So we'll see. That's probably not going to sustain, but he looks good. He's shooting a decent amount. He's getting, big, pretty decent minutes in terms of the what the team is getting. And I'm still going to disbelieve in what the Kraken are doing probably the whole season, because I'm not sure the team is this good, but they continue to play pretty well. Either way, I like Jared McCann. The other guy another guy that I'm really high on is Mo Applesider. He looks so good, and we definitely told you about him in the offseason. I don't understand how he's also only 18% rostered on Yahoo, 65 on Fantrax. That's probably from all the dynasty leagues. But he's playing a lot. He's already had the 3rd most ice time of any defenseman on Detroit, and getting power play time. We were kind of wondering how the power play was going to shake out, but it looks like you got Hronek and then he and Letty up there. So they're kind of splitting a 2D on one power play unit, but he's getting some points. He's getting some opportunity. Mo Sider also got 3 hits in a couple games, a block. So some peripherals are coming. Not the biggest shooter so far, but these are just his first two NHL games. So I imagine he'll get a little bit more. He should probably be on your roster, though. He's probably better opportunity than a lot of the lower guys, unless they're just straight up peripheral monsters, then maybe. And then this is one that I don't love, but Gostisbehere. Gostisbehere is doing Gostisbehere things again. He's getting opportunity. And this was, I was so worried about. I remember mentioning this in the offseason that I was super high on Chychrun and worried when they signed Gostisbehere, because there's only one reason you sign a guy like that, like Keith Yandel, is to put him on the power play. There's really no other reason to have Shane Gostisbehere in town. And yeah, he took power play time away from Jacob Chychrun. He took most of the power play time. And no, Arizona is not a great team. They pretty much looked as we expected in the first game, better in the second game. We'll talk about that in a second. But he got power play time. He got some shots. He's doing stuff. He's out there, regular strength shifts, getting some time on ice. So I think he's probably worth rostering in a lot of leagues. I still, certainly wouldn't take him over Chikrin in any kind of dynasty or keeper format. And in redraft, I'd probably still take Chikrin for all those sweet peripherals. But Gostisbehere is someone you probably want to look at, because I think that's going to continue unless he can. I guess the worry is that he starts to really look terrible at even strength. But then again, it's not like Arizona's trying to win. So why should they care so much? Just let him go out there and be his adventurous self, and then and be fine with that. So that's Gostisbehere. And then the other one that is on the same team that we should probably just mention, Jesse, because I think this is a name that most people probably haven't heard or didn't know about, and that's Karel Vejmelka, who got the start in Arizona yesterday as we're recording this Saturday. He got the start and he looked awesome. He basically was practically almost a shutout, one goal, which was really kind of not his fault. It was kind of a weird bounce. But he looked really, really good. Vejmelka did. And people are probably like, who's this guy? Haven't heard of him. He's a Czech-born player who they drafted in the 5th round a long time ago, and he's been playing in the Czech league and doing really well. I hadn't really known much about him, but digging into him a little bit, his numbers in the Czech league are strong. In the 920s, 940s. Most recently, 925 save percentage, 915, 911, 911. And if you're wondering, like, okay, that's the Czech league, but if you believe Patrick Bacon's model, the Czech league is the 3rd hardest league in the world, ahead of the SHL. Some people will debate that, and I'm possibly one of them. But according to the numbers, the NHL is tops, then KHL, and then the Czech league with the SHL close behind. Then you have the NLA, the Liga, and the AHL. So that Czech league is pretty tough, and he did well in that league. And the other thing about Vejmelka is that who does he have to pass to get playing time in Arizona? Talking about Carter Hutton and Joseph Kozhinash, who are really not NHL caliber goalies, in my opinion. So not that a starter in Arizona is going to mean a whole lot, Jesse, but if it's a league like ours, common league, where basically anyone who's playing and getting you points is pretty valuable, then he's probably someone that should be rostered. And his expected goals per goals conceded have been pretty good the last few seasons, above 1 in pretty much every season except this most recent one. And that's a really nice be able to say you're outperforming your expected goals. So Vejmelka is a guy you should probably be thinking about in dynasties, where something like a couple of rough outings with some goals against aren't going to hurt you too much. Jesse, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying there. That was a guy who snuck up on me as well. And you never know. There are always times during a season where somebody will sneak out of a seeming goalie dumpster fire situation and actually have an impact. I think of Kevin Lankinen in the first half of last season. So you always want to pay attention to even the teams where it looks like nobody is relevant, because you never know. Every once in a while, a star is born. In Arizona, over the years, keep in mind, for as many things as they do wrong, they do seem to have some voodoo when it comes to goalies, because Darcy Kemper turned his career around in a lot of ways. There had some of his best times. Antti Ranta had some good times there. Aiden Hill parlayed his limited time into a starting role. So they do get some good goalie performances from time to time. Who knows what will come out of that? And then just jumping back, I mean, the thing with Seider is a lot of people have been saying he's going to be more of a defensive defenseman. So the fact that he's getting power play time on ice, to me, is significant. Not that there's an incredibly deep defensive roster in terms of who would get that power play quarterback role on Detroit, but I'm encouraged to see that Detroit is not just using him in an exclusively defensive position this year. Yeah, let's do another segment, Victor. This is another one that was suggested by our listeners, and this is going to be the cliffhangers. And the cliffhangers are about that under-regarded element in dynasty hockey, and to some extent, even in redraft, the old guys, and anything that we're seeing from old guys whose career is headed toward the cliff. And is he going to go over and fall? Or is there maybe some value, some resurgence, something that people did not expect to see? So I'll start. I've got one good one and one bad one so far and none of these are mysteries if you've been following the first week of the NHL, but these are the ones that are at least standing out to the extent to me that I'm paying attention and thinking I might be learning something new and not just the flavor of the week. Marc-Andre Fleury has had himself a week. You have to look at multiple things with Marc-Andre Fleury. We knew coming in that he was going to Chicago and it was going to be a whole different situation than the Vegas Golden Knights that he'd been on for the last couple of teams. And remember, I mean, he lost the job in Pittsburgh a few years back, and that was a very good team, but just absolutely excelled last year. But Chicago bad in terms of giving him an opportunity to succeed. His career trajectory, he's old. We know he's old. And what is he going to be able to do this year? I think I underestimated the impact of the change of scenery. You have to think, and I don't want to get into psychoanalysis, and this is just Jesse throwing this out, but the guy for part of the offseason didn't even know if he wanted to keep playing. I mean, how is that going to affect your offseason preparation? Fleury famously is a hard worker in the offseason and has a extensive training regimen. It's what you need to do to be successful at an advanced age in the NHL. And his offseason was seriously disrupted by that trade to Chicago. And so kind of a lot of the signs are aligning. I think that people who are drafting based on last year's stats or even last year's stats with a discount are starting to regret it. In his first game in